Hello and welcome. There are 10 concepts that instructional designers need to incorporate when creating effective distance learning lessons. In this video, you will learn about all of them. Let's get started. The first concept is the purpose. Establishing what will be the purpose of the lessons within the course, as well as the course itself, gives the lessons meaning and gives the course direction. When creating the purpose for the lessons, one should incorporate the course or program standards and objectives. Additionally, one should take into consideration the instructor and students' expectations for the course. This requires research and communication with the stakeholders. Knowing the stakeholders' values and abilities allows the course developer to begin lesson planning with the end in mind. More on lesson objectives. The lesson objectives that we discussed in the previous slides are developed prior to the start of the lesson and incorporate 4 things. First, the audience of the lesson. It's usually the learners that are the ones that are receiving instruction. Under what conditions? What will the instructor do to supply the learners with the information or skills needed to complete the activities and assessment successfully? Third, what observable action will the learners do? Note that knowing, appreciating, understanding, and comprehending are not measurable or observable action verbs. Research Bloom's taxonomy of higher order thinking skills to learn more about observable, actionable, and measurable verbs. Fourth, how will the instructor assess that learning took place? What is the minimum passing requirement? This should be stated in numerical terms. The second concept are assumptions. The more the course developer knows about the users of the lessons, both the instructor and the students, the better able he or she will be in creating a personal and inclusive learning experience. However, instructional designers do not know exactly who will end up using the lessons they create. They can only make educated guesses or assumptions about the learner's prior knowledge, understandings, and skills. When designing course content, the instructional designer must also take into account the instructor and student's ability to use technology. One must ask if the technology required to access the information is subtracting from the learning experience. If that is so, then what can be done to improve it? The third concept is sequencing. Sequencing allows the instructor to link together a chain of events so that learners can build upon their learning experience. One can organize learning events using linear, spiraling, and scaffolding sequencing models. Different models employ different learning strategies like scaffolding and chunking. Instructional strategies should match the lesson objectives and the student's skills and knowledge. The fourth concept are the activities. Passive and active learning activities are 2 types of activities that distance learning instructional designers can employ. With passive activities, learners acquire information by reading, listening, and viewing. With active learning activities, learners interact with the concepts which they are learning. Experimenting, rehearsing, and trying are active learning activities. There needs to be a mix of both passive learning and active learning activities. Ask yourself, what do you want the students to do to demonstrate that they acquired the concepts of the lesson? What will students need to know to get them to perform successfully? What constraints are present in the current system, be it technology or user-centered? Will the activity be best suited for synchronous, asynchronous, or mixed experience? Once you have considered the pros and the cons, you can select the activities that best meet the objectives while minimizing the delivery constraints. The fifth concept are resources. Be very careful when selecting resources. Remember that you must meet the needs of all learners. Make sure that your resources are varied and multimodal. You should have a mix of viewing, listening, and reading resources to meet the needs of all learners. Additionally, All resources should have multiple methods for communicating to the learner. For example, video resources should have closed captioning. Audio resources should be transcribed, and reading resources should have audio capabilities. Extra resources extend the learning beyond the lesson, engage students in self-directed learning, and help to build the learner's professional toolbox. As a bonus tip, include resources from the professional organizations that pertain to the course. The sixth concept is application. Application goes beyond activities by putting the learning into use in a different way. It is said that we learn by teaching others. With application, learners can apply the knowledge and skills they acquired and practice prior skills by engaging in discussions with their classmates and peers. Another advantage of application is that it extends learning beyond the class time. This can be done in fun ways, like having a social media page for the class to interact. Students can also share things they find through a Google Drive folder or a free Padlet. The seventh concept is assessment. How students would be assessed was one of the pieces of the lesson objectives. Assessments measure the level of mastery of the goals and objectives and should be used throughout this instructional sequence. Assessments are necessary to provide students with feedback as to their course progression, a review of the concepts that they're learning, or as a method for reteaching the concepts and skills when it's necessary. There are different types of assessments. Formative and summative assessments are but two of the many types available. Instructional designers should incorporate a mix of assessment types to create a variety and add interest to the class. Assessment selection should take into consideration what assessments would best measure student mastery of the lessons, not what is easiest or most convenient for the instructor. Exams may not always be the best measure of content mastery. A project could demonstrate if students were able to learn the concepts and apply them in a real-life situation. In short, there are pros and cons to all assessments. You should consider the student's needs and skills, the lesson content and objectives, and the course learner constraints when designing the assessments. Because these considerations are discussed when creating the lesson objectives, it makes sense to think about the assessment before the start of the lesson. Adjustments can be made to the assessments if the student characteristics are different than the assumptions. The eighth concept is reflection. Instructor and student-based reflections provide opportunities for higher order thinking to take place. Evaluation is at the top of Bloom's taxonomy. Self-evaluation gives the learners the opportunity to account for what they have learned throughout the course and to see where there are areas for growth. Reflection can take place in the form of journaling, a discussion post, or a short paper. The ninth concept is independent learning. When students go outside of the course shell to find information, they are partaking in independent learning. Students need to be judicious as to the sources of information where they are getting their knowledge. Students should know how to access the online library to find refereed journals that share peer-reviewed research. University sites and professional organizations are also good places to lead students to finding reputable information. The last concept is evaluation. Evaluations can take place during the course and after the course is completed. There are different course evaluation models available. All evaluations should be purpose-driven and multidimensional. The instructor and the learner's evaluations should be taken into consideration for future course planning. When evaluating a course, one needs to know if the students were successful in attaining the goals and objectives, which are why assessment and reflections are necessary. That's it! Congratulations! You have reached the end of the instructional content for this module. Be sure to read, understand, and complete the module activities explained in the next section. You will be required to post to the discussion board and contribute to the conversation by responding to the posts of your peers. Finally, there's a distance learning instructional design strategies quiz that puts together all that you have learned in this module. Well, that's it for now. Have fun and learn a lot.